My son surprised me with a vacation and drove me to the airport himself. But something about his behavior that morning didn't feel right. His eyes wouldn't meet mine, and he kept checking his phone. Then suddenly he rushed off, leaving me alone at the gate. Just as I was about to board, a stranger grabbed my arm and said, "Sir, if you value your life, don't get on that plane." The truth he revealed moments later exposed a nightmare hiding inside my own family. Hello everyone, and welcome. Before we dive into the story, please like the video, subscribe, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from in the world. I truly enjoy seeing how these stories connect people everywhere. Just a quick reminder, some elements in this story have been dramatized to enhance the emotional experience. Any resemblance to real events is purely coincidental. Now let me tell you what that stranger showed me at the airport, the moment that changed the course of my life. My name is George Harrington. I am 65 years old, and these days I live alone in a small cabin tucked deep in the forested hills of western Montana. The cabin sits on 3 quiet acres surrounded by tall pines and Douglas firs that whisper whenever the wind moves through them. Most mornings I wake before sunrise and hear elk stepping carefully through the trees beyond my window. The air here is cold and clean, the kind that fills your lungs and reminds you that you are still alive. The sky stretches wide above the mountains, untouched by city lights or the distant rumble of traffic. Out here, the silence feels honest. It is peaceful in a way I never imagined I would need. But 2 years ago, my life looked very different. Back then, I was 63. And every morning I woke up in the same house I had shared with my wife Margaret for more than 30 years. We bought that house together in 1987, the same year we got married. It stood in the Washington Park neighborhood of Denver, Colorado, a 2-story colonial home with white trim, a deep front porch, and a backyard bordered by a wooden fence that Margaret painted herself one hot summer when we were still young enough to believe we had endless time ahead of us. Margaret loved that yard. She filled it with roses and tulips and anything else she could coax from the Colorado soil. Every spring she would kneel in the dirt beneath the kitchen window, wearing her gardening gloves and that wide sun hat she adored. She planted bright red tulip bulbs there, carefully pressing each one into the earth as if she were tucking away a promise. Year after year, those flowers returned faithfully blooming in neat rows, as if they understood how much she loved them. Margaret loved that house. She loved Denver. She loved the life we built together there. We had one child, a son named Lucas. He was born in 1989, just 2 years after we bought the house. Margaret used to laugh and say Lucas was the best thing we had ever done together. For a long time, I believed that completely. Margaret and I were together for 35 years. We met when we were both 26 at a community fundraiser in Boulder. She was working the registration table, greeting people as they walked in, while I had only shown up because a college roommate convinced me to go. I remember watching her laugh at something someone said. The sound of that laugh caught my attention immediately. I remember thinking very clearly, I want to know that woman. 3 months later, we were engaged. 1 year after that, we were married. Margaret was more than my wife. She was my best friend. She was the person I told everything to, the good news, the bad days, the worries that kept me awake at night. She made every room in that house feel warm and alive. On Sunday mornings, the kitchen smelled like the bread she baked from scratch. The living room still held the same couch we bought together in 1995, worn soft from years of movie nights and quiet conversations. And the bedroom upstairs was ours, a place where the outside world never seemed to reach us. Then, in October of 2021, everything changed. Margaret passed away. It was breast cancer, an aggressive kind that moves faster than anyone expects. By the time doctors finally caught it, the disease had already spread too far. We spent nearly $80,000 trying to fight it. Chemotherapy, radiation, experimental treatments that insurance refused to cover. I would have spent every dollar I owned if it meant having her beside me just one more year, one more month, even one more day. but none of it worked. Margaret was 61 when she left this world. We had shared 35 years together, more than half of my entire life. During her final weeks, we brought her home from the hospital. I rented a medical bed and placed it in our bedroom so she could spend her last days surrounded by familiar walls and sunlight. A hospice nurse came every afternoon to help care for her. Margaret's sister flew in from Arizona and stayed with us. Lucas visited almost every day. One afternoon in late October still lives clearly in my memory. The light coming through the curtains was soft and golden. Margaret was awake but very weak. Lucas sat beside her on the bed, holding her hand gently. She looked at him with those clear, determined eyes she had always had, even when her body was failing her, and she whispered, "Promise me you'll take care of your father when I'm gone." Lucas squeezed her hand tightly. His voice cracked when he answered, "I promise, Mom. I promise." Margaret smiled at him. It was one of the last smiles I would ever see. 3 days later, she was gone. After Margaret died, the house felt completely different. It no longer felt like the home we had built together. Instead, it felt like a museum filled with memories that refused to fade. Every room reminded me of her. Her reading glasses were still resting on the coffee table. Her favorite cardigan hung over the back of the kitchen chair. The calendar on the wall still showed her handwriting. Doctor appointments, grocery reminders, little notes telling herself when to water the tulips. I couldn't bring myself to move any of it. Throwing those things away felt like erasing her existence. So I kept living exactly as I always had. I went to the grocery store every Tuesday. I mowed the lawn every Saturday morning. I watered the tulips each spring, even though every flower that bloomed felt like another reminder of everything I had lost. Life continued, but it felt empty. I was alone. Lucas tried to help in his own way. He visited about once a week, usually on Sunday afternoons. Sometimes he came alone, sometimes with his wife. Lucas was 34 at the time, strong, confident, and successful. The kind of man any father would normally be proud of. He worked as a financial advisor in downtown Denver, drove a sleek car, and lived in a modern condo in the Highlands neighborhood overlooking the city. From the outside, his life looked perfect. His wife was 31, and just as polished as he was. She worked as a marketing director for a growing tech startup. She always appeared composed and stylish, the kind of person who looked like she belonged in advertisements for luxury watches or high-end vacations. Whenever they visited, they would sit with me in the living room and ask how I was doing. Lucas often encouraged me to get out of the house more, to see people and try new things. His wife would nod in agreement, offering polite smiles and supportive words. I appreciated the effort. I truly did. I believed Lucas was trying to keep the promise he had made to his mother that afternoon beside her hospital bed. I believed he genuinely cared about me. I thought I was fortunate to still have family around me. What I didn't realize then was that everything I believed about my life was about to change. The chain of events that would ultimately reshape my life began on a quiet evening in early April, about a week before everything changed forever. That afternoon, Lucas called and asked if he and his wife could come over for dinner. I told him yes immediately. I was always glad to see my son. If I'm being honest, I was lonely most days. The house felt too large for one person, and the silence inside it could stretch on for hours. When people came over, even if only for a short visit, the place felt alive again, almost like it used to when Margaret was still there. They arrived a little after 7 that evening. Lucas stepped through the door first, wearing a button-down shirt and a pair of dark jeans. His wife followed behind him in a sleek black dress and heels, looking as though she had just left an important business meeting. She carried a small gift bag in one hand, the kind with colorful tissue paper folded carefully at the top. I had made pot roast for dinner. It was Margaret's old recipe, one of the few dishes I had learned to cook properly after she passed away. The smell of it filled the kitchen, bringing back memories of the Sundays when she used to stand at the stove humming softly while dinner simmered. Lucas took 2 generous servings and told me it tasted exactly like his mother's cooking. His wife smiled politely and said I should cook more often. After dinner, we cleared the dishes together and brought them to the sink. Once the kitchen table was empty again, Lucas reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and pulled out a blue envelope. Without saying much, he slid it slowly across the table toward me. "Dad," he said, "we want to give you something." I looked at the envelope, puzzled. "What's this?" I asked. "Just open it," his wife said. She leaned slightly forward in her chair, smiling brightly, with that perfectly rehearsed expression she always seemed to wear. I opened the envelope carefully. Inside were 3 airline boarding passes. They were business-class tickets from Denver International Airport to Phnom Penh, Cambodia. The departure date was April 15th. The return flight was scheduled for April 22nd. For several seconds, I simply stared at them. I didn't understand what I was looking at. "We're all going," Lucas said, his voice warm with excitement. "The 3 of us. A family trip." I slowly raised my eyes from the tickets and looked at him. My hands had begun to shake. "There's more," his wife added. She reached into the gift bag she had brought and pulled out a printed hotel confirmation. The paper was thick and glossy. At the top was the name of a 5-star hotel in central Phnom Penh. "We booked 2 rooms," she said cheerfully. "One for you and one for us. They're right next to each other." I couldn't find the words to respond. I just sat there staring at the tickets and the hotel reservation, the neat black lettering spelling out dates and locations that suddenly felt unreal. Lucas leaned forward and placed his hand gently on top of mine. "Dad," he said quietly, "we know the last year has been really hard for you. We thought maybe it's time you got away for a while, saw something different, experienced something new." He paused for a moment. "Mom always talked about traveling to Southeast Asia," he continued. "Remember?" Of course I remembered. Margaret used to collect travel magazines, National Geographic Travel plus Leisure, and anything else she could find at the bookstore. She would sit at the kitchen table, flipping through the pages, folding down corners, where photographs caught her eye. Angkor Wat glowing at sunrise, floating markets crowded with wooden boats, golden temples rising above tropical forests. Sometimes she would point to a picture and say softly, "Someday, George. Someday we'll go there." But someday never arrived. Now I was sitting at the same kitchen table holding those plane tickets in my hands. For the first time in nearly a year and a half, I felt something I hadn't allowed myself to feel since Margaret died. Hope. It was fragile and uncertain, like a small flame flickering in the wind. Lucas's wife reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Her grip was firm, almost too firm. "You deserve this," she said, looking directly into my eyes. "After everything you've been through." I felt my chest tighten. Before I knew it, tears were running down my face. I wasn't embarrassed. I simply sat there at the table where Margaret and I had shared breakfast almost every morning for decades, and I cried. Lucas stood up and walked around the table, wrapping his arms around my shoulders. "We're going to take care of you, Dad," he said quietly. "I promise." And in that moment, I believed him. During the following week, I threw myself completely into preparing for the trip. For the first time since Margaret passed away, I had something to look forward to. I drove to REI and bought travel clothes, lightweight cargo pants, breathable shirts, and a wide-brimmed hat to protect my face from the tropical sun. I picked up a sturdy travel backpack, a portable charger for my phone, and a small money belt to keep my passport safe. At the checkout counter, the young cashier smiled and asked where I was headed. When I told her Cambodia, her eyes widened. "That's incredible," she said. "You're going to love it." I hoped she was right. A few days later, I stopped by the bookstore and bought a thick travel guide about Cambodia. The pages were filled with glossy photographs, ancient temples rising from jungle ruins, crowded night markets glowing with lantern light, the wide brown waters of the Mekong River winding through the countryside. Every evening, I would sit at the kitchen table turning those pages slowly. I imagined the three of us exploring those places together. I pictured Lucas pointing out landmarks from the guidebook, his wife snapping photographs of temples and markets, the three of us sitting by the river with cold drinks in our hands, while wooden boats drifted quietly past. I even called my old friend Frank to tell him about the trip. Frank had been my neighbor for 15 years before moving to Boulder. Even after he left Denver, we stayed in touch. "Well, it's about damn time," Frank said with a laugh when I told him the news. "Margaret wouldn't want you locked up in that house forever, George. She'd want you out there living." I knew he was right. But looking back now, there were small details, tiny moments I didn't question at the time, that should have made me pause. Lucas stopped by the house twice more that week, saying he wanted to check on me and help with packing. Both visits felt strange. He seemed distracted. He sat on the couch with his phone in his hand, glancing down at the screen every few seconds. His leg bounced constantly. His jaw looked tight like he was clenching his teeth. When I asked if something was bothering him, he quickly shook his head. "Everything's fine, Dad," he said. "Just work stuff. Don't worry about it." His wife behaved differently. If anything, she seemed almost too enthusiastic. Every time she spoke about the trip, it sounded like she was performing for an audience. She walked around the house, complimenting the furniture, asking me how I was feeling, telling me how excited she was to see Cambodia. But there was something about her eyes. They looked flat, distant. There was something behind them that I couldn't quite identify. At the time, I told myself I was imagining things. I assumed I was simply nervous about traveling again after Margaret's death. I told myself Lucas and his wife were busy professionals with demanding careers. The fact that they were taking an entire week off to travel with me felt like a generous gift. I didn't allow myself to question it. The night before the flight, I walked slowly through the house one last time. I paused in the doorway of the bedroom Margaret and I had shared for 35 years. The room still carried the faint scent of her perfume, lavender mixed with vanilla. Standing there in the quiet darkness, I spoke softly the same way I used to when she was still beside me. "We're finally going to see the places you dreamed about, Margaret," I whispered. "All three of us." That night I went to bed feeling something I hadn't experienced in a long time. Excitement, anticipation, a cautious, delicate kind of happiness. When morning arrived, I woke up at 4 o'clock, my heart filled with hope for the journey ahead. Lucas and his wife arrived at exactly 4:30 that morning. I heard their car pull into the driveway before I even saw the headlights through the front window. The low hum of the engine faded, followed by the soft thud of 2 car doors closing outside. I was already standing near the front door with my suitcase and travel backpack beside me. My passport was tucked safely inside the inner pocket of my jacket. I had been awake for almost half an hour, too excited about the trip to fall back asleep. Before they had a chance to knock, I opened the door. "Morning," Dad, Lucas said. His voice sounded strangely flat, almost mechanical, like he was reciting something rather than speaking naturally. "Morning, son," I replied, smiling. Then I looked past him toward his wife, who stood a few steps back on the porch. "Good morning." She nodded politely. "Morning, Dad." Her smile appeared tight and controlled. It was the kind of polite expression people wear in photographs. It didn't quite reach her eyes. Without saying much else, Lucas reached for my suitcase. He lifted it and carried it straight to the trunk of the car. His wife followed him quietly, her purse slung over one shoulder, her phone already resting in her hand. I stepped outside, closed the door behind me, and locked the house. For a moment I glanced back at the windows, feeling a strange mixture of nervousness and excitement. Then I walked down the driveway and climbed into the passenger seat. Lucas slid into the driver's seat. His wife settled into the back seat directly behind me. I twisted slightly in my seat to look at her. "You excited?" I asked. Yeah, she answered, but she wasn't looking at me. Her gaze remained fixed on the dark street outside the window. Lucas started the engine and slowly pulled the car out of the driveway. The sky was still completely dark. Streetlights cast long, pale shadows across the empty road. It was the kind of quiet you only hear in the earliest hours of morning before the city begins to stir. My mind was racing with anticipation. I had been waiting all week for this trip, imagining everything we would see together. I began talking almost immediately. I was reading in the guidebook last night about the temples near Phnom Penh, I said. There are some incredible ones not too far from the city, and I definitely want to see the Royal Palace and the Silver Pagoda. Neither of them responded. I also read about the Russian market, I continued. Apparently the street food there is amazing. Everyone says the noodles are the best in the city. And there's a river tour along the Mekong at sunset that looks incredible. Still nothing. Lucas stared straight ahead at the road, both hands locked tightly around the steering wheel. His wife remained silent in the back seat, looking out the window as the dark houses slid past. I glanced at Lucas. "You okay, son?" I asked. "Yeah." His voice sounded tense, just tired. But he didn't look tired. If anything, he looked wired, like he was holding something inside himself. A moment later, his phone buzzed. Then it buzzed again. Lucas glanced down at the device sitting in the cup holder. The glow from the screen lit his face for a brief second. I saw his jaw tighten. He didn't answer it. From the back seat, his wife leaned forward slightly. "Lucas." Her voice was low and controlled. Lucas lifted his eyes to the rearview mirror. Their gazes met. Something passed silently between them. Something I didn't understand. Then Lucas looked back at the road and tightened his grip on the wheel. The phone buzzed again. This time his wife reached forward from the back seat and picked it up from the cup holder. She unlocked it, read the message, and quickly typed something with her thumb. After that, she placed the phone back down without saying a word. "Work?" I asked casually. "Yeah," Lucas replied. He didn't look at me. "Just some last-minute stuff." I nodded, though the exchange left me uneasy. It was barely 5 in the morning. Who would be texting him about work at that hour? And why was his wife answering messages on his phone? I pushed the thought aside. They both had demanding careers. Taking a week off on short notice probably meant tying up loose ends before leaving. We continued driving in silence. The highway stretched ahead of us, empty and dim under the glow of distant streetlights. One by one, the lamps slid past our windshield like slow-moving stars. I looked over at Lucas again. His knuckles had turned white where his fingers gripped the wheel. His shoulders were hunched forward, and his jaw looked locked tight. Trying to lighten the mood, I spoke again. "You know, I said this reminds me of when I first taught you how to drive." There was no response. "You were 16, I continued. "We came out early on a Sunday morning, just like this, before there was any traffic. You were so nervous you could barely get the car out of the driveway." I chuckled quietly at the memory. "You stalled 3 times before we even made it to the end of the block. Your mom was standing on the porch waving at us. She was so proud of you." Lucas said nothing. I glanced back toward his wife. She was staring out the window with a blank expression, as if she hadn't heard a single word. I stopped talking. Instead, I turned toward my own window and watched the dark silhouettes of trees and buildings slide past. A few minutes later, Lucas's phone buzzed again. This time he picked it up himself. He unlocked it, read the message on the screen, and suddenly his face drained of color. He looked quickly into the rearview mirror. His wife gave a tiny nod, almost imperceptible. Lucas set the phone back down harder than necessary. "Everything okay?" I asked quietly. "Fine," he snapped. Then he seemed to catch himself. "Sorry, Dad," he said more softly. "I'm just dealing with some stuff. Don't worry about it." but I was worried. I couldn't help it. Something about the entire situation felt wrong. Lucas's hands were trembling slightly. His breathing sounded shallow and uneven, and his wife sat behind me with an unsettling calm, like she was waiting for something to happen. I tried to convince myself I was imagining things. Maybe I was simply nervous about traveling again after Margaret's death. By the time we reached Denver International Airport, the sky had begun to lighten. The sun had not risen yet, but the horizon carried faint streaks of gray and pale blue. The airport appeared ahead of us, huge and quiet in the early morning, its distinctive white tent-shaped roof glowing faintly under the dawn light. Lucas pulled into the departures lane and stopped near the terminal entrance. He turned off the engine, but remained sitting there for several seconds, staring straight ahead. His hands were still gripping the steering wheel. His wife opened her door first. She stepped out without saying anything, pulled her small carry-on suitcase from the trunk, and stood on the curb, waiting. Lucas finally opened his own door. He popped the trunk and lifted my suitcase out. His movements were quick and jerky, almost frantic. "You coming?" I asked. He nodded, but he still didn't look at me. The three of us walked into the terminal together. Lucas walked a few steps ahead. His wife stayed beside him. I followed behind them, pulling my suitcase across the polished floor. Inside, the terminal felt cool and brightly lit. Fluorescent lights hummed quietly overhead. Only a handful of travelers moved through the building, business people rolling small suitcases, families guiding sleepy children, and a few airline employees in crisp uniforms. We located the check-in counter for our flight. The line was short. Lucas stood beside me, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. His wife stood on his other side, arms crossed, watching the departure board above us. His phone buzzed again. He pulled it out, read the message quickly, then shoved the phone back into his pocket. His wife glanced toward him. He gave a slight shake of his head. The line moved forward. When it was our turn, the woman behind the counter greeted us with a friendly smile and asked for our identification and boarding passes. I handed mine over calmly. Lucas reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his driver's license. But his hand was shaking so badly that the plastic card rattled loudly when he placed it on the counter. We finished checking in and made our way toward the security checkpoint. The TSA line was surprisingly short that morning. Lucas walked several steps ahead of me, his phone already in his hand again. His wife kept pace beside him without saying a word. I followed behind them with my suitcase, trying my best to ignore the uneasy knot tightening in my stomach. Security went smoothly enough. Shoes off, laptop out, pockets empty. A routine I'd done dozens of times before. I collected my belongings on the other side of the scanner, slipped my shoes back on, and reached for my bag. When I looked up, Lucas and his wife were already walking toward the gates. They hadn't waited. "Lucas, wait up," I called out. He stopped, but he didn't turn around. His wife paused beside him. I pulled my suitcase along the floor and caught up with them. "You two okay?" I asked. "Yeah," Lucas muttered without looking at me. "Gates this way." We continued through the terminal together, though it hardly felt like we were together at all. A few early travelers passed by us, business people, dragging sleek carry-on bags, a couple holding hands, a tired-looking family shepherding two sleepy children. Overhead announcements echoed through the wide terminal, bouncing off the high ceilings. We reached Gate B23 at exactly 6:45. I glanced up at the large departure board mounted above the seating area. United Flight 1847 Denver DEN to San Francisco, SFO, departure 8 a.m., boarding 7:30 a.m., status on time. Seeing the flight information made a small flutter of excitement stir in my chest. In a little over an hour, we'd be airborne, heading west toward the first leg of our long journey. I spotted 3 empty seats near the window and sat down, setting my bag beside me. Lucas didn't sit. Instead, he began pacing slowly back and forth near the gate entrance. Every few seconds, he checked his phone, his thumb hovering over the screen. His wife lowered herself into the seat next to me. She sat stiffly, her back straight, her hands folded in her lap. Her gaze remained fixed straight ahead. "Everything okay?" I asked her quietly. She turned her head toward me. For a brief moment, something flashed across her eyes, something quick and unreadable. Then her expression smoothed over again. "Yes, Dad," she said with a thin smile. "Just tired." I nodded, though the answer didn't quite satisfy the growing unease in my chest. Lucas kept pacing. His phone buzzed again. He looked down at it immediately. I watched his jaw tighten as he read the screen. Then he glanced toward his wife. She gave him the faintest nod. The tension between them felt invisible but unmistakable, like a wire pulled tight. At 7:10, the overhead speaker crackled to life. The gate agent's voice echoed across the seating area. "Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We will now begin boarding United Flight 1847 with service to San Francisco. At this time, we would like to invite our first class and business class passengers to begin boarding." That was our group. I stood up, reaching for my bag. "All right," I said with a small smile. "Let's go." Lucas stopped pacing. Slowly, he turned to face me. The color had drained from his face. His eyes looked red and glassy, as though he hadn't slept at all. Suddenly, he stepped forward and grabbed my hand. "Dad," he said. His voice cracked. "I need to tell you something." The knot in my stomach tightened instantly. "What is it?" I asked. He opened his mouth as if to speak, but no words came out. Instead, his eyes drifted toward his wife. She stood up slowly from the chair and walked over, placing one hand firmly on his shoulder. "We can't go," Lucas said at last, his voice barely louder than a whisper. For a moment, I thought I had misheard him. What I asked. His wife stepped forward, her face composed and calm. "Something came up," she said evenly. "At both of our jobs. Emergency situations. We have to go back right now." I stared at them, trying to process what she was saying. "What are you talking about?" I said. "Lucas, that's insane. We've been planning this trip for weeks. You took time off work. You bought the tickets." "What kind of emergency?" "I'm sorry," Dad Lucas interrupted. His voice trembled. "You have to go, please, just go. Enjoy the trip. We'll explain everything later." Explain what? My voice rose without me meaning it to. A few people nearby turned their heads toward us. "Lucas, what the hell is going on?" He still wouldn't meet my eyes. Instead, he stared down at the floor, his hands shaking slightly at his sides. His wife tightened her grip on his shoulder. "We really do have to leave," she said firmly. "Lucas." I said, my voice softer now. "Talk to me. You're scaring me." He shook his head once his jaw clenched so tightly I could see the muscles twitch. Then suddenly he stepped forward and wrapped his arms around me. It wasn't a normal hug. It was desperate. His entire body trembled as he held onto me. I could feel the shaking running through him like an electric current. He leaned close to my ear and whispered, "I love you, Dad." His voice broke. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." Before I could respond, his wife grabbed his arm. "Lucas," she said sharply, "we have to go. Now." Lucas released me slowly. His eyes were wet. His wife was already tugging him toward the exit. "Lucas," I shouted. "Lucas, wait," but he didn't stop. The two of them turned and walked away quickly, almost running toward the terminal exit. Within seconds, they were gone. I stood there frozen beside the gate, my suitcase in one hand, my boarding pass clutched in the other. My heart pounded hard against my ribs. My thoughts spun in circles. What just happened? The overhead speaker crackled again. "Final boarding call for business class passengers on United Flight 1847. I looked down at the boarding pass in my hand. Seat 3A. the trip I had spent the past week dreaming about. But suddenly I didn't want to go anymore. Not without my son. Not without understanding what had just happened. Still, what choice did I have? The tickets were non-refundable. The hotel reservation was already paid for. Lucas had practically begged me to continue the trip without him. Maybe it really was some kind of emergency. Maybe he would explain everything when I got back. I took a deep breath and lifted my bag. Slowly, I walked toward the gate. The agent standing at the counter smiled politely. "Good morning, sir. Boarding pass, please." I handed it over. She scanned it, returned it to me, and gestured toward the jetway. "Have a wonderful flight." I nodded. I took one step toward the door, and then I felt a hand rest gently on my shoulder. I turned around. A man stood behind me. He looked to be in his late 40s, maybe early 50s. His hair was streaked with gray, and his face was weathered like someone who had spent a lot of time outdoors. He wore jeans, a flannel shirt, and heavy boots. But it was his eyes that caught my attention. They were steady, focused, serious. He leaned slightly closer and spoke in a quiet, controlled voice. "Sir," he said, "please don't get on that plane." I stared at the man in front of me, confusion quickly giving way to irritation. "Excuse me," I said sharply. "Who are you? What are you talking about?" The man didn't react to my tone. His hand remained on my shoulder, steady, calm, almost reassuring. He looked directly into my eyes, unflinching. He appeared to be somewhere in his late 40s, maybe a little older. His short hair was already turning gray, and his face had the rough, weathered look of someone who had spent most of his life outdoors. He wore jeans and a blue flannel shirt, the kind of simple clothes you might see on a rancher or a carpenter. But what held my attention was his expression. There was something serious in it, something urgent. "My name is Raymond Foster," he said quietly. His voice was calm, but there was a firmness beneath it that made me pause. "Please don't get on that plane," he continued. "I need to talk to you, right now." I glanced past him toward the boarding gate. The airline agent was still calling for passengers. The jetway door remained open, and travelers were steadily walking through it. "I don't know you," I said. My voice sounded harsher than I intended. "Why would I listen to you?" Raymond didn't raise his voice. He simply met my gaze with the same steady focus. "Because I just overheard something that I believe you need to know," he replied. There was an intensity in his eyes that made my chest tighten. "Please," he added, "just give me 5 minutes. If you still want to board that plane after you hear what I have to say, I won't stop you. But you deserve to hear this first." I hesitated. Every instinct I had told me to ignore him, to turn back toward the gate, board the flight, and continue with the trip Lucas had insisted I take. But there was something about this man, something in the quiet confidence of his voice, the seriousness in his expression, that stopped me from walking away. 5 minutes, I said at last. Raymond nodded once. "Let's go somewhere quieter," he said, gesturing away from the gate. I followed him, pulling my suitcase behind me, my heart pounding harder with each step. We walked through the terminal, past clusters of travelers and rows of seating, until we reached a small Starbucks tucked into the corner of the concourse. Raymond led me to a table near the back, away from the line of people ordering coffee. We sat down. Raymond leaned forward slightly, folding his hands on the table. Up close, he looked exhausted, like someone who hadn't slept much the night before, but his eyes were sharp and alert. "I'm flying to Seattle this morning," he began. "My gate is over in Concourse A. I was sitting there about 30 minutes ago, waiting for my flight and minding my own business." He paused briefly before continuing. Then 2 people came and sat down a couple of seats away from me. A man and a woman. Young. Probably in their mid-30s. My stomach tightened. "What did they look like?" I asked. "The man was tall, dark hair," Raymond said. "He was wearing a blue jacket." The woman looked very polished, black coat heels, brown hair pulled back. Lucas and his wife. Raymond continued. They sat close together. The man pulled out his phone and made a call. He tried to keep his voice low, but he wasn't quiet enough. I was sitting only 2 seats away. I could hear him. My throat felt dry. "What did you hear?" I asked. Raymond's expression darkened slightly. He inhaled slowly as though preparing himself. He said, "He's about to board the plane. I don't think I can do this." My chest tightened. There was a pause. Raymond continued, like someone on the other end of the call was speaking. Then the man said, "I know. I know it's too late." Another pause. And then he said something that made my blood run cold. Raymond's voice grew quieter. He said, "Central Market, Day 3. Make it look like a robbery." The room seemed to tilt around me. I gripped the edge of the table to steady myself. "No," I said quickly. "No, that's not possible. You must have misheard. You must have." "I didn't mishear," Raymond said firmly but calmly. I heard him clearly. He leaned back slightly in his chair, and the woman sitting next to him wasn't on the phone, but she was listening. At one point, she leaned toward him and said something. "What did she say?" I asked. I couldn't hear every word Raymond admitted, but it sounded like she said, "It's already done. We can't stop it now." My hands began to tremble. The man looked like he was about to fall apart. Raymond continued, like he was having second thoughts, but the woman, she was completely calm. Cold, even. After a moment, she stood up, grabbed his arm, and pulled him to his feet. "You're saying they left?" I asked. "Yes," Raymond said, "and I followed them." "You followed them?" I did. Raymond's jaw tightened. I've been around long enough to recognize when something isn't right. That conversation didn't sound like anything good. So I followed them through the terminal. "Where did they go?" I asked. "To gate B23, he said. My heart skipped. I kept my distance, Raymond continued. I watched from across the seating area. I saw them approach an older man who looked happy, excited, like he was about to go on a big trip. Raymond paused. Then I saw them leave. "Leave," I whispered. "They walked away from him," Raymond said quietly. "They didn't board the flight with him. They just turned and left him standing there." My throat tightened painfully. "That older man was you," Raymond said. "Wasn't it?" I nodded slowly. Suddenly I felt nauseous. Raymond leaned back in his chair. "I don't know who those 2 people are to you," he said, "but I know what I heard. And I know that if you get on that plane, something very bad could happen to you in Cambodia." I shook my head, struggling to process his words. "That was my son," I said hoarsely. "And his wife. They couldn't." Raymond didn't argue. "I'm not telling you what to believe," he said gently. "I'm only telling you what I heard." He paused. "And there's one more thing." I looked up at him. "They mentioned money," Raymond said carefully. "A large amount of money." My stomach dropped. And something about life insurance. The words struck me like a blow. "Life insurance," I whispered. Raymond nodded. The man said something like, "It's a lot of money. We won't have to worry anymore." And the woman said, "Just make sure he gets on that plane." I sat frozen. My son. My only child. The boy I had raised. The man I had taught to be honest, responsible, and kind. According to this stranger, he had been discussing something unthinkable, something deadly. But my mind refused to accept it. Not completely. Not without proof. I need to be certain. I said slowly, my voice shaking. I need to know this isn't some terrible misunderstanding. Maybe you misheard. Maybe it wasn't them. Maybe, Raymond said gently. Then he looked directly into my eyes. But are you really willing to bet your life on that? My hands were shaking when I pulled my phone from my pocket and stared down at the glowing screen. For a moment, I just sat there, unable to move, unable to decide what to do next. Raymond rose slowly from the chair across from me. I'll give you some privacy, he said quietly. He stepped back from the table, but before leaving, he added gently, Please, make that call. You deserve to know the truth. I looked up at him. Thank you, I whispered. My voice barely carried across the table. Thank you for stopping me. Raymond gave a small nod. I hope I'm wrong, he said. I really do. He paused, studying my face for a moment. But if I'm not, then you need to know what's happening. With that, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the steady stream of travelers moving through the terminal. I was alone again. The Starbucks buzzed quietly around me, people ordering coffee, baristas calling out names, rolling suitcases clattering across the tile floor. But it all felt distant, like I was hearing it through water. My phone rested in my hand. I needed to call someone I trusted completely, someone who knew every detail of my life, my finances, my paperwork, the accounts Margaret and I had shared. Frank. Frank and I had been friends for more than 30 years. When Margaret passed away, he had helped me sort through the mountain of paperwork that followed my will, my banking accounts, my insurance documents. If anyone could tell me whether this nightmare had any truth behind it, it was Frank. I scrolled through my contacts until I found his name. Then I pressed call. The phone rang. Once, twice, 3 times. Finally, Frank answered. George, he said, his voice thick with sleep. It's 7:40 in the morning. What's going on, Frank? I said quickly. My voice trembled despite my effort to steady it. I need you to do something for me. Right now. Please. There was a rustling sound on the other end of the line sheets, shifting, a mattress creaking. Frank was sitting up. What's wrong? He asked, suddenly alert. Are you okay? I don't know, I admitted. I swallowed hard. Frank, I'm at the airport. I was about to board a flight to Cambodia, but something just happened. I hesitated, my throat tightening. Someone told me they overheard Lucas and his wife talking. I continued. They said they were planning something bad. In Cambodia. Frank didn't respond immediately. And they mentioned life insurance, I added quietly. There was a long silence. Finally, Frank spoke again. George, he said carefully, what exactly are you telling me? I'm saying I need you to check something, I said urgently. I need you to go to my house. Right now. Use the spare key I gave you. What, please just listen, I said. Go inside. Look through my desk. My filing cabinet. Every document. I need you to find out if there's a life insurance policy in my name that I don't know about. I took a shaky breath. Find out if Lucas is listed as the beneficiary. Another pause. George, Frank said slowly. If what you're suggesting is true, please, I interrupted. My voice broke. I'm begging you, Frank. I need to know. Frank exhaled heavily. All right, he said. Okay. I'm getting dressed now. I'll drive over. He paused. It'll take about 30 minutes to get from Boulder to your place. Thank you, I whispered. Just thank you. We hung up. I sat there alone at the small cafe table, my phone resting in front of me. Time seemed to slow to a crawl. 7:45, 7:50, 8 o'clock. Across the terminal, I watched the departure board flicker. United 1847. Departed. My flight was gone. I had missed it. Part of me felt relief. Another part felt terrified. I stood up and walked to the counter, ordering a cup of coffee I didn't really want. When the barista handed it to me, I carried it back to the table and sat down again. The coffee sat untouched. My stomach was twisted into tight knots. 8:30, 8:45. Every few seconds I checked my phone. No messages, no calls. Finally, at exactly 9 o'clock, my phone rang. Frank, I answered immediately. Frank George. The moment I heard his voice, I knew something was wrong. In 30 years of friendship, I had never heard Frank sound like that. What did you find? I asked. Frank inhaled slowly. George, I'm in your house, he said. I went through your desk like you asked. There was a pause. And I found something. My heart pounded harder. What I whispered. I found a life insurance policy, Frank said. A new one. My stomach dropped. It's dated 3 months ago, he continued. January. I felt the blood drain from my face. How much? I asked quietly. Frank hesitated. $350,000. The room spun. Beneficiary, Frank said carefully, is Lucas Harrington. My son. I couldn't speak. Frank continued. George, I've seen your signature hundreds of times. I helped you sign paperwork after Margaret passed away. Another pause. The signature on this policy looks like yours, but something about it feels wrong. What do you mean? I asked weakly. The loops are too perfect, Frank explained. The pen pressure is unnaturally even. It looks practiced, like someone copied it carefully. You think it was forged? Yes, Frank said quietly, and there's more. I closed my eyes. I checked your bank statements, he continued. There was a withdrawal 2 weeks ago, $12,000, April 1st. I gripped the table edge. Do you remember approving that transfer? Frank asked. No, I said immediately. I didn't authorize anything. The transaction was done online, Frank said. The IP address traces back to Lucas's neighborhood, probably from his condo. My stomach churned violently. Frank, I said slowly, please tell me that's everything. Silence filled the line. Then Frank spoke again. George, there's a laptop here, sitting on your coffee table. What I think Lucas left it during his last visit, Frank said. And I opened it. My chest tightened. The browser history is still there, Frank continued. George, there are search terms from about 2 weeks ago. I waited. Life insurance payout timeline. Accidental traveler incidents in Southeast Asia. Phnom Penh Central Market crime statistics. How long to process international incident claims? The words felt like knives. Frank, I whispered. There's more, he said quietly. I found emails between Lucas and an anonymous account. The subject line reads, Arrangement confirmed. I pressed my hand against my forehead. The messages mention Central Market, Frank continued. Day 3, and a payment. My stomach dropped. $12,000, he said, half paid up front, half after the job is completed. My fingers tightened around the edge of the table. And George. Frank's voice cracked. I also found text messages between Lucas and his wife. My chest felt hollow. From this morning, Frank said. At 6:45, she texted him, Is he on the plane yet? I stopped breathing. Lucas replied, almost. I can't do this. Frank swallowed. She answered, you don't have a choice. It's already in motion. Central Market. Day 3. Make sure he boards. Everything inside me went still. My son. My only child. The boy Margaret had loved more than anything. George Frank said, are you still there? Yeah, I managed. George, I'm calling the police, Frank said firmly. Right now. You need to stay exactly where you are. Stay at the airport. Do you understand me? I nodded, even though he couldn't see. Okay. I'm contacting the Denver Police Department, he continued. I'll tell them everything I found. They'll send officers to meet you there. Don't go anywhere. Okay, I whispered again. George. Frank's voice broke. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I couldn't answer. I ended the call and set the phone down on the table. My hands were trembling. My whole body was trembling. Around me, travelers rushed through the busy terminal, dragging luggage and checking departure screens, moving forward with their ordinary lives. And I sat there in the middle of it all, completely hollow. My own son had tried to have me killed. For money. For $350,000, I couldn't breathe. Frank's final words echoed over and over inside my mind. George, I'm calling the police. Right now, 9:15 in the morning. I had no idea what I was supposed to do next. I didn't know where to go, who to talk to, or how to process what I had just learned. So I remained exactly where I was sitting at that small Starbucks table in the middle of the airport terminal. My cup of coffee sat untouched in front of me, growing colder by the minute. Travelers streamed past in every direction, families dragging suitcases, business people hurrying toward their gates, airline employees speaking into radios. No one noticed me. I felt like I had become invisible. 30 minutes passed that way. At 9:45, 2 people approached my table. They were dressed in plain clothes, a man and a woman. But there was something about their posture that immediately told me they weren't ordinary travelers. The man looked to be around 50. His hair was salt and pepper gray, cut short and neat. His face was weathered, the expression serious and focused. The woman beside him was younger, maybe in her late 30s, with sharp eyes and a calm but no-nonsense demeanor. The man reached into his jacket and held up a badge. Mr. Harrington. I looked up. Yes. My name is Detective James Bradley, he said. This is Officer Patricia Wells with the Denver Police Department. Your friend Frank Coleman contacted us. He gestured toward the empty chair across from me. Would it be all right if we sat down? I nodded silently. They both took seats across from me. Detective Bradley folded his hands neatly on the table and studied my face for a moment. Mr. Harrington? He said, his voice calm but firm. We need to ask you a few questions. But first I want you to understand that we're taking this situation very seriously. Your friend gave us information suggesting that you may be in danger. He paused. Is that correct? My throat felt dry. Yes, I said quietly. Officer Wells pulled a small notebook from her jacket and clicked a pen open. Can you walk us through everything that happened this morning? Bradley asked. I took a deep breath. Then I began telling them the entire story. I explained how Lucas and his wife had given me the airline tickets. I described the trip they had planned to Cambodia. I told them about the strange behavior in the car that morning, the tension between them at the airport, and the moment they suddenly refused to board the flight. I described the man who had stopped me from getting on the plane. Detective Bradley leaned slightly forward. The man who warned you, he said. Is he still here in the terminal? I glanced around the busy Starbucks. I'm not sure, I admitted. He left after I called my friend Frank. Bradley exchanged a quick look with Officer Wells. She stood up immediately, and scanned the area around the cafe. Within a minute, she returned, and beside her was Raymond Foster. Raymond stopped when he saw the detectives. His eyes moved briefly toward me before he spoke. "I'm the one who overheard the conversation," he said calmly. Bradley motioned toward the empty chair. "Please sit down, Mr. Foster," he said. "Tell us exactly what you heard." Raymond sat across from us and carefully repeated everything he had told me earlier, word for word. He described Lucas's phone call, the hushed conversation, the phrase that had caught his attention. Central Market. Day 3. Make it look like a robbery. He explained how the woman had mentioned that it was already in motion. He repeated the references to money and life insurance. Officer Wells wrote continuously, her pen moving rapidly across the page. When Raymond finished, Bradley turned his attention back to me. "Mr. Harrington," he said, "we need information about your son and his wife." "What kind of information?" I asked weakly. "Full names, addresses, phone numbers, places of employment, anything you can provide." I told them everything. My son's name was Lucas Harrington, 34 years old, a financial advisor in downtown Denver. His wife was 31. She worked as a marketing director at a tech startup. They lived in a condo in the Highlands neighborhood, only a short drive from my home near Washington Park. Bradley listened carefully as Officer Wells wrote down every detail. When I finished, he looked at me with an expression that held something close to sympathy. "Mr. Harrington," he said quietly, "we need to move very quickly." I swallowed. "If what Mr. Foster overheard is accurate," he continued, "there could be someone in Cambodia right now expecting you to arrive. We need to stop this situation before it goes any further." I nodded slowly, unable to speak. "We'd like you to come down to the station with us," Bradley said. "There are a few things we need to show you, and we'll need to take a formal statement." I agreed. At 10:15 that morning, I found myself sitting in an interrogation room inside Denver Police Department headquarters. The room felt cold and sterile. The walls were plain gray. The metal table reflected the overhead fluorescent lights. The chairs were hard and uncomfortable. My hands wouldn't stop trembling. Detective Bradley and Officer Wells sat across from me. Bradley opened a thick folder and spread several documents across the table. "Mr. Harrington," he said carefully, "your friend Frank allowed us access to your home earlier this morning. While you were at the airport, we began gathering evidence." He slid a document toward me. It was a life insurance policy. "This policy was issued 3 months ago," Bradley explained. "It is registered in your name." I looked down at the page. "The listed beneficiary," he continued, "is your son, Lucas Harrington." My stomach tightened. "And the payout amount," Bradley said quietly, "is $350,000. I stared at the number printed on the page. $350,000. Frank had mentioned the amount on the phone, but seeing it there in black ink made it feel horrifyingly real. "That's a significant sum," Bradley said. I nodded weakly. He tapped the signature line near the bottom of the document. "Our forensic team examined this signature," he continued. "It appears very convincing, but it is not genuine." "What do you mean?" I asked. "It's a forgery," Bradley said. "Someone replicated your signature extremely well, but there are subtle inconsistencies." Officer Wells slid another sheet of paper across the table. "This is your bank statement," she said. I looked down at it. "A withdrawal of $12,000 was made from your joint checking account 2 weeks ago," she continued. "April 1st. My chest tightened. "The transaction was conducted online," Wells added. "The IP address traces back to your son's residence." I felt sick. "Mr. Harrington," Bradley said, "based on the evidence we currently have, and Mr. Foster's testimony, we were able to obtain an emergency warrant from a judge." "What does that mean?" I asked quietly. It means we're treating this as a conspiracy to cause serious harm, Bradley said, and it gives us the authority to act quickly. He paused. We have already begun searching your son's residence. My heart pounded harder. We seized his electronic devices, Bradley continued. His laptop, his phone, and his wife's phone. Our investigators are going through their emails, text messages, and financial records. I pressed my hands against the table to steady myself. At 1 o'clock that afternoon, Bradley's phone vibrated. He glanced at the screen and stood up. "Excuse me," he said before stepping outside. Officer Wells remained in the room with me silent. 5 minutes later, Bradley returned. He was carrying a laptop. He placed it on the table and opened it. The screen lit up, revealing a desktop filled with folders and documents. "Mr. Harrington," Bradley said slowly, "we found additional evidence." He turned the laptop so I could see the screen. "A significant amount of it involves your daughter-in-law." My blood turned cold. Bradley opened a folder. A list of emails appeared. "Your daughter-in-law," he said carefully, "appears to be the primary organizer behind this plan." He clicked on one of the messages. The subject line read, "Final Confirmation." The message itself was short and written in careful, vague language, but the meaning was unmistakable. Arrangement confirmed. Central Market, Phnom Penh. Day 3. Target elderly male solo traveler. Payment $12,000. Half up front, half upon completion. Make it look like a robbery gone wrong. My lungs refused to draw in air. Bradley opened another file. Text messages between Lucas and his wife. From that very morning. 6:45 a.m. Is he on the plane? Yet 6:47 a.m. Lucas almost. I can't do this. 6:48 a.m. You don't have a choice. It's already in motion. Central Market. Day 3. Make sure he boards. 6:50 a.m. Lucas, I can't. He's my father. 6:51 a.m. He's worth $350,000, and we're out of time. The payment is already made. If he doesn't get on that plane, we lose everything. I stared at the screen in disbelief. My daughter-in-law. The woman my son had married. The woman I had welcomed into my family. She had orchestrated the entire plan. Detective Bradley looked at me quietly. "Mr. Harrington," he said, "there's more evidence we need to show you." He closed the email window slowly. "And all of it leads back to her." Detective Bradley slowly turned the laptop screen toward me. "Mr. Harrington," he said in a careful, steady voice, "what you're about to see may be very difficult, but I believe you deserve to know the truth." I swallowed hard and nodded, even though a part of me felt like I couldn't handle another shock. Bradley opened a folder on the laptop. The sender's address immediately caught my attention. Allison's email. It was the same address she used for family messages, birthday photos, and the cheerful holiday greetings she sent every Christmas. But the recipient was someone I had never heard of. Fixer pp@proton.me. Bradley clicked on one of the messages. The subject line read, "Final Details." My stomach tightened as I leaned forward and began reading. Target male American, 63 years old. Arrival date April 15th. Location Central Market. Phnom Penh, Day 3. Incident must appear natural. Accident or robbery acceptable. Total fee $25,000. Half up front, half upon completion. The words blurred for a moment as the room seemed to tilt beneath me. I grabbed the edge of the metal table to steady myself. Allison, my daughter-in-law, the woman who had sat across from me at my kitchen table just weeks ago, smiling warmly as she told me I deserved a vacation. The woman who had insisted this trip would be good for me. The woman who had stood beside Lucas this morning while he hugged me goodbye. She had negotiated my life the way someone negotiates a business deal. Mr. Harrington, Officer Wells said gently, "Are you all right?" I opened my mouth, but no sound came out. My stomach churned violently. Detective Bradley opened another email. This one contained an attachment, a bank transfer confirmation. "The $12,000 your friend Frank discovered," Bradley explained quietly. "It wasn't just withdrawn from your account. Allison transferred it to a Cambodian phone number." He pointed to the screen. "Country code +855, Cambodia." I stared at the details displayed on the document. Amount transferred $12,000. Date April 1st, 2 weeks earlier. That payment, Bradley continued, was the deposit. The remaining $13,000 was meant to be delivered after the job was completed. The words made my chest tighten painfully. Bradley opened another folder. "We also pulled Allison's phone records," he said. A list of call logs appeared on the screen. "Over the past 6 months," he continued, "she's exchanged 247 calls and text messages with one particular person." I looked up slowly. Who? Bradley clicked on a profile file. A photograph filled the screen. A man in his early 50s stared back at us, well-groomed and confident. He wore an expensive suit and had salt and pepper hair brushed neatly to the side. "His name is Preston Walsh," Bradley said. 52 years old, CEO of a tech company based in Boulder. Divorced, no children. He owns a house in Cherry Creek valued at approximately $2.3 million. I blinked at the image, confused. "I don't understand," I said quietly. "What does he have to do with any of this?" Bradley opened another window. A long text conversation appeared between Allison and Preston. The messages stretched back for months. I began reading them, and with every line my stomach twisted tighter. "Allison, I can't wait until we don't have to hide anymore." Preston, "Soon, babe. Soon we'll have everything." "Allison, I hate lying to him. But it's the only way." Preston, "Once this is finished, we start over. Just you and me." "Allison, I love you." Preston, "I love you too. Just a little longer." The dates moved closer to the present. 3 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago. Last week. Then this morning. My hands began to tremble. The newest message had been sent at 6:30 a.m., barely minutes before Lucas and Allison arrived to pick me up. "Allison, it's happening today. He's on his way to the airport." Preston, "Are you sure Lucas can handle it?" Allison, "He doesn't have a choice. The money's already sent." Preston, "And after Allison, we leave tomorrow. Bahamas. Just like we planned." A heavy silence filled the room. I realized I had stopped breathing. Detective Bradley watched me carefully. "Mr. Harrington," he asked gently, "were you aware your daughter-in-law was involved in an affair?" I slowly shook my head. Tears rolled down my face before I even realized they were there. Officer Wells slid another document across the table. "This came from Allison's email account," she said. I looked down. It was a flight confirmation. 2 airline tickets, Denver to Nassau, Bahamas. Departure date April 16th. Tomorrow. Passengers Allison Harrington and Preston Walsh. My hands trembled as I stared at the page. Tomorrow. She had planned to disappear tomorrow. Detective Bradley spoke quietly. "Our assessment is that Allison intended to collect the life insurance payout and leave the country with Preston Walsh." He paused. "Your son would have been left behind to face the consequences." My voice sounded distant even to my own ears. Does Lucas know Bradley exchanged a glance with Officer Wells? We're not certain yet, he admitted. However, we have evidence suggesting Allison has been manipulating him for quite some time. He opened another file. Financial records indicate Lucas has accumulated substantial debt gambling losses and failed investments. He looked directly at me, approximately $425,000. The number hit me like a physical blow. Bradley continued carefully. Allison appears to have known about the debt. Based on what we've uncovered, she used that pressure to convince him the insurance payout was their only way out. He paused again, but everything we've seen suggests she intended to abandon him once the money was secured. My head spun. My son, my daughter-in-law, an affair, $425,000 in debt, a hired attack in Cambodia, a secret plan to escape to the Bahamas. It was too much to absorb. Detective Bradley finally spoke again. Mr. Harrington, we have enough evidence to move forward. I looked up slowly. We're preparing arrest warrants for both your son and Allison, he said. We'll also be bringing Preston Walsh in for questioning. My voice came out weak. What happens now? Bradley straightened slightly. We're sending units to locate them immediately. Your son is likely still at his condo. Allison may be there or she may already be with Preston Walsh. Either way, we'll find them. Officer Wells leaned forward. We're also notifying authorities in Cambodia, she added. If someone has been hired to carry out this attack at Central Market, we intend to stop them before anyone is harmed. I nodded numbly. Detective Bradley closed the laptop and stood. Then he looked down at me, his expression serious but measured. We're going to arrest them today, he said. He paused before continuing. Mr. Harrington, there's something I need to ask you. I waited. When we interrogate your son, Bradley explained you have the option of observing from the viewing room. You wouldn't be in the interrogation room with him, but you would be able to see and hear everything. He studied my face carefully. Some people find that it helps them understand what really happened. Others find it too painful. He folded his arms. The decision is completely yours, my mind raced. Did I want to see my son sitting across from detectives? Did I want to hear him explain how he became part of a plan to take my life? Did I want to look into his eyes and finally understand why Detective Bradley waited patiently? Then he asked quietly, So tell me, Mr. Harrington, would you like to be present when we interrogate your son? I didn't answer Detective Bradley's question right away. Instead, I sat there in silence, staring down at the cold metal table while my thoughts spun in every direction. My mind felt heavy, like it was trying to process too many emotions at once. Did I want to see my son? Did I really want to hear what he had to say? Before I could force myself to respond, Bradley's phone vibrated on the table. He glanced at the screen, then stood up quickly. Excuse me, Mr. Harrington, he said. I need to coordinate the arrest. Officer Wells will stay here with you. He stepped out of the room, leaving the door to close softly behind him. Officer Wells remained seated across from me. Her posture was calm and steady, the same quiet professionalism she had shown since the beginning. Can I get you anything? She asked gently. Water, coffee, I shook my head. The idea of eating or drinking anything felt impossible. So I sat there, waiting. Time seemed to move strangely in that room. Minutes stretched out like hours, and every second felt heavier than the last. Nearly 2 hours passed before the door finally opened again. Detective Bradley walked back inside. His expression was tight and focused, but there was something else in his eyes, something that looked almost like relief. We got him, Bradley said. I lifted my head slowly. Lucas, I asked. Bradley nodded. Yes. He pulled out the chair and sat across from me again. He wasn't at his condo, he explained. But we located him at a friend's house, a man named Stephen Parker, 32 years old. He lives about 15 minutes from your son's place. Bradley folded his hands together on the table. Let me explain how it happened, he said. It was just after 2 in the afternoon when 4 police vehicles surrounded Stephen Parker's house. The neighborhood was quiet and suburban rows of small homes with trimmed lawns and quiet streets. Stephen's house was modest, a simple 2-story place with pale siding, a wooden fence surrounding the backyard, and a narrow driveway beside the garage. Detective Bradley led the team. Officer Wells was with him, along with 2 additional officers. Bradley walked straight to the front door and knocked firmly. 3 sharp knocks. A moment later, the door opened. A young man stood in the doorway. Tall, lean, messy brown hair. His expression was confused and uneasy. Stephen Parker. The moment he saw the police badges, the uniforms and the patrol cars parked outside, the color drained from his face. "What's going on?" Stephen asked nervously. "We're looking for Lucas Harrington," Bradley said. "Is he here?" Stephen hesitated. Only for a second. But it was long enough. "I need you to step aside, Mr. Parker," Bradley said. Stephen swallowed. "I don't step aside. Now." Stephen slowly moved backward, raising his hands. Bradley stepped into the house. Officer Wells followed close behind. 2 other officers moved around the side of the building to cover the back exit. Lucas Harrington, Bradley called out loudly. "Denver Police Department, we have a warrant for your arrest. Come out now." For a moment the house was completely silent. Then there was movement. Fast movement. From the back of the house. Officer Wells reacted instantly. She rushed through the kitchen and burst out the back door into the yard. Lucas was already halfway across the lawn, running toward the fence. "Stop!" Police Wells shouted, but Lucas didn't stop. He kept running. Wells was faster. She closed the distance in seconds, catching him just before he reached the fence. She grabbed his shoulder and pulled him down hard. Lucas hit the grass face first. In the next instant, Wells had both of his arms behind his back, snapping handcuffs around his wrists with practiced speed. Lucas didn't fight. He didn't resist. He simply lay there on the grass with his face pressed into the dirt, and then he began to cry. "Oh God," Lucas sobbed. "Oh God. I didn't want this. I didn't want this to happen." His whole body shook. "I didn't want this. I didn't want this." Wells pulled him to his feet, but Lucas could barely stand. His knees buckled as if the strength had drained out of him. Lucas Harrington, Wells said in a steady official tone, "You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit serious harm. You have the right to remain silent." But Lucas wasn't listening. He was crying too hard. 2 officers escorted him back through the house. Stephen Parker still stood in the doorway, pale and frozen with shock. "What did he do?" Stephen whispered. One of the officers looked at him. "Conspiracy," he said. "The victim was his own father." Stephen's legs nearly gave out. He grabbed the doorframe to steady himself. Outside, the officers placed Lucas in the back of a police car. He never looked up. He just sat there, slumped forward, his shoulders shaking as he cried. Then the car door closed, and they drove him away. Detective Bradley finished speaking and looked at me quietly. "That's what happened," he said. "I felt like all the air had been sucked out of the room. Your son is here now," Bradley continued. "Downstairs, in one of the interrogation rooms." I couldn't speak. My chest felt tight, like breathing required effort. Bradley leaned slightly forward. "Mr. Harrington, we've officially charged him with conspiracy to commit serious harm," he said. "With the evidence, we have the forged insurance policy, the bank transfers, the emails, the messages. We have more than enough to hold him." I nodded slowly. "He isn't going anywhere," Bradley added. He paused for a moment. We brought him in about 20 minutes ago. We read him his rights and explained the charges. Then we left him alone in the room for a while. What did he say? I asked quietly. Bradley sighed. Not much, he said. He's been crying, mostly repeating the same thing over and over. What he keeps saying, I didn't want this. I didn't want this. I closed my eyes. Bradley's voice softened slightly. Mr. Harrington, he said your son is asking to see you. My eyes opened. What he's asking for you, Bradley repeated. He says he wants to explain what happened. I stared at him in disbelief. You want me to go in there to talk to him? Bradley shook his head. No, not directly. We can't allow that yet. He gestured toward the hallway outside the room. But you can observe. There's an observation room next to the interrogation room, Bradley explained. It has a one-way mirror. You'll be able to see and hear everything. Lucas won't know you're there. My stomach twisted. You'll hear everything he says during the interrogation, Bradley added. I felt sick. You don't have to do this, Bradley said gently. If it's too painful, we understand. He paused. But if you want the truth, if you want to hear it directly from him, this is your opportunity. I looked down at my hands. They were still shaking. My son, my only child, the boy I had raised, the man I had loved more than anything in the world. Now he was sitting downstairs, handcuffed to a table, waiting to be questioned about a plan to end my life, and he wanted to explain. Detective Bradley slowly stood up and looked at me carefully. So I'll ask you again, Mr. Harrington, he said quietly. He's asking for you. He says he wants to explain. I stared at Detective Bradley, unable to speak. My son wanted to explain. My son, who'd tried to have me taken from this world, wanted to tell me why. Bradley's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then looked back at me. There's something else you need to know, he said. While we were arresting Lucas, another team was at his house, going after Allison. He stood up and gestured for me to follow him. Come with me. I'll tell you what happened. We walked down a hallway to another small room, a briefing room with a table, a whiteboard, and a few chairs. Bradley motioned for me to sit. At the same time, we were surrounding Stephen Parker's house. Bradley began. A second unit was executing a warrant at your son's condo in the Highlands. 4 officers, led by Sergeant Martinez. Bradley opened a folder and pulled out several photographs. Crime scene photos, evidence logs. When they arrived at 2 o'clock, Bradley continued. Allison was home, alone, and she was packing. He slid one of the photos across the table. It showed a bedroom with 2 large suitcases open on the bed. Clothes folded neatly inside. Shoes, toiletries. The officers knocked, Bradley said. Like announced themselves. Allison opened the door. She looked surprised but not panicked. Not at first. Bradley paused as if remembering the report he'd read. My Sergeant Martinez said, Allison Harrington, we have a warrant for your arrest. Put your hands on your head. And what did she do? I asked. She blinked, Bradley said, like she didn't understand. Then she said, I'm sorry, what's going on? Where's Lucas? Bradley shook his head. She tried to play innocent, but Martinez wasn't buying it. He told her again, hands on your head, you're under arrest. She complied, I asked. Eventually, Bradley said. But not before she tried to talk her way out of it. She kept asking what the charges were. She kept saying there must be some mistake. She even tried to cry. I felt sick. Bradley slid another photo across the table. This one showed the interior of the condo, a sleek, modern space with hardwood floors and floor-to-ceiling windows. While Martinez was cuffing her, Bradley said, "The other officers searched the house, and they found a lot." He pulled out an evidence list and read from it. 2 plane tickets to Nassau, Bahamas, departing tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Passengers Allison Harrington and Preston Walsh. First class. One-way tickets. My hands clenched into fists. $18,000 in cash. Bradley continued. Hidden in one of the suitcases, wrapped in a sweater, small bills, 50s and 100s. He looked up at me. That's the other half of the payment to the fixer in Cambodia. The first $12,000 was already sent. This $18,000 was supposed to be sent once the job was done. I couldn't breathe. They also found her laptop, Bradley said. Open on the kitchen counter, still logged in. Email correspondence with fixer pp at proton.me. Text messages with Preston Walsh. All of it right there. He slid another photo across. A screenshot of an email. Everything is set. He boards tomorrow. Day 3, Central Market. Make it look natural. Final payment upon confirmation. The email was sent from Allison's personal account 3 days ago. When confronted with the evidence, Bradley said Allison changed her strategy. She stopped playing innocent. She started blaming your son. What did she say? I asked. Bradley leaned back in his chair. She said Lucas must have used my account. He made me do this. He threatened me. I had no choice. I closed my eyes. But we have proof, Bradley said. Voice recordings from her phone calls with the fixer. Email metadata showing the messages were sent from her devices, not Lucas's. Text messages with Preston Walsh that make it very clear she was the one orchestrating this. He tapped the folder. Your daughter-in-law, Mr. Harrington, is the architect of this entire plan. She researched the fixer. She made the arrangements. She transferred the money. She manipulated your son into going along with it by exploiting his debts. And she was planning to take the insurance payout, leave your son to deal with the fallout, and run off to the Bahamas with her lover. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. Where is she now? I asked. Downstairs, Bradley said. In a separate interrogation room, about 50 feet away from your son. They're in different wings. They can't see each other. They can't communicate. He closed the folder and looked at me carefully. Mr. Harrington, we're going to interrogate both of them, separately. We'll start with your son, because he's asking for you. He wants to explain. He wants to tell you his side of the story. I didn't know what to say. Bradley stood up. You don't have to be there. You can stay here or you can go home and we'll update you later. But if you want to hear the truth, if you want to hear it directly from him, now is the time. I looked down at my hands. They were still shaking. My son, my daughter-in-law. Both of them sitting in separate rooms waiting to be interrogated for trying to have me taken from this world. And I was supposed to listen. Detective Bradley walked to the door, then turned back to me. Mr. Harrington, he said quietly, are you ready to face your son? If you're still here with me, drop justice in the comments so I know you've stayed through this journey. Just a small reminder, some elements in this story are dramatized to strengthen the narrative, so not every detail represents real events. If you'd rather stop here, that's completely okay. But if you want to see the moment I finally confronted my son and heard his confession, stay with me. At 4 o'clock in the afternoon, Detective Bradley led me down a narrow hallway to a heavy metal door. A small window was set into the wall beside it, one-way glass. Through it, I could see a small, cold room with a metal table and 2 chairs. Lucas sat in one of the chairs. His hands were cuffed to a metal ring bolted to the table. His face was pale, his eyes red and swollen. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. Bradley looked at me. "You don't have to go in there, Mr. Harrington. You can watch from here. He won't know you're watching." I shook my head. "I need to talk to him." Bradley hesitated. "Are you sure?" "Yes." Bradley nodded slowly. "All right. I'll be right outside if you need me." He opened the door. I stepped inside. The door closed behind me with a heavy final sound. Lucas looked up. The moment he saw me, his face crumpled. He collapsed forward onto the table, his shoulders shaking, and he started to sob. "Dad," he choked out. "Dad, please, please forgive me, please." I stood there for a moment, frozen. Then I walked slowly to the table and sat down in the chair across from him. My hands were shaking. My whole body was shaking. I tried to keep my voice steady, but I could feel my heart breaking with every word. "Why, Lucas?" I said. "Why did you do this to me?" Lucas couldn't look at me. He kept his face pressed against the table, his body heaving with sobs. "I'm sorry," he gasped. "I'm so sorry. I didn't want this. I didn't want any of this." "Then why?" I asked again. My voice cracked. "Why did you try to have me taken away?" Lucas finally looked up. His face was a mess, tears streaming down his cheeks, his nose running, his eyes red and raw. "I was desperate," he said. His voice was barely a whisper. "Dad, I was so desperate. I didn't know what else to do." "Tell me," I said. "Tell me everything." Lucas took a shaky breath, and then he started talking. "It started in January of last year," he said. 2022. I got invited to a poker game, just a friendly game with some guys from work. I thought it would be fun. I thought I could handle it. He wiped his face with the back of his cuffed hand. "But I lost," he continued. "I lost a lot. And I kept going back, trying to win it back. And I kept losing. By the end of the year, I was down $150,000. I stared at him. $150,000. Lucas nodded miserably. "I took out loans, credit cards, personal loans. I maxed everything out. And when the banks wouldn't lend me any more, I went to people who would." "Loan sharks," I said. "Yes." Lucas's voice broke. "Yeah, they charged me insane interest. 20%, 30%. The debt just kept growing. And a week ago, it was up to $425,000. My stomach turned. "They came to my condo," Lucas said. "Two men. They beat me up. They told me I had 10 days to pay them back or they'd come after Allison. They said they'd hurt her. They said they'd hurt the baby." "The baby," I said. Lucas looked down. "Allison told me she was pregnant. 4 months. She said if I didn't find a way to get the money, they'd hurt her and the baby both." I closed my eyes. Later, I would find out that there was no baby. Allison had lied about that too. But in that moment, Lucas believed it. "Why didn't you come to me?" I asked. My voice was shaking. "Lucas, why didn't you tell me I would have helped you? I would have done anything." "I was ashamed," Lucas said. He was crying again. "I was so ashamed, Dad. I didn't want you to know what I'd done. And Allison said, she said you wouldn't have enough money to pay off the debt anyway. She said the house and your savings wouldn't be enough. She said there was only one way." I looked at him. "So you decided to have me taken from this world?" Lucas's face twisted in agony. "No. It wasn't my idea, it was Allison's, she kept saying. She kept saying you'd already lived a full life, that you were 63 years old, that Mom was gone and you were lonely and maybe it would be better if you didn't have to suffer anymore. I felt like I'd been stabbed. She said Mom would want us to be happy. Lucas continued, his voice breaking. She said Mom would understand. She said this was the only way to save our family. Your mother, I said, my voice shaking with anger, told you to take care of me. On her deathbed, she made you promise. Lucas collapsed forward, sobbing. I know, Dad. I broke my promise. I broke everything. Tell me the rest, I said. Tell me about Cambodia. Lucas wiped his face again. Allison found the person, the fixer. She found him online somehow. She made all the arrangements. She set up the email account. She transferred the money. She planned everything. All I had to do was make sure you got on the plane. And you did, I said. I tried, Lucas whispered. But at the airport, Dad, at the airport, I couldn't do it. I couldn't watch you get on that plane. I tried to tell Allison we had to stop. I told her I couldn't go through with it. But she texted me. She said it was too late. She said the money was already paid. She said if we didn't go through with it, the fixer would come after us. She said we couldn't turn back. I stood up slowly. Tears were streaming down my face. You destroyed everything, I said. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the room like a knife. You destroyed our family. You destroyed your mother's memory. You broke the promise you made to her. Lucas slid out of his chair and collapsed onto the floor, still cuffed to the table, sobbing uncontrollably. Please, Dad, he gasped. Please, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I looked down at him, my son, my only child. The boy I'd taught to ride a bike. The boy I'd watched grow into a man. The boy Margaret had loved more than anything in the world. And now he was on his knees crying, begging for forgiveness, for trying to have me taken from this world. I turned and walked to the door. Dad! Lucas screamed. Dad, please, don't leave me. Please. I opened the door and stepped out into the hallway. Detective Bradley was standing there waiting. I looked at him. I can't, I said. My voice was hollow. I can't look at him anymore. I walked away. Behind me, I could still hear Lucas's sobs echoing through the metal door. I didn't go into the room when they interrogated Allison. I couldn't. I'd barely made it through the conversation with Lucas. I didn't have the strength to face her. Instead, I sat in the observation room with Officer Wells. She brought me water. She didn't say anything. She just sat with me while I stared at the one-way glass, watching the empty interrogation room on the other side. At 5:30 in the evening, 2 officers brought Allison in. She looked calm, composed. Her hair was still pulled back neatly. Her clothes were clean. She walked into the room like she was walking into a business meeting. They sat her down, cuffed her hands to the table, and then Detective Bradley walked in. Mrs. Harrington, Bradley said, sitting down across from her. Do you know why you're here? Allison looked at him with cold, steady eyes. I want a lawyer. Bradley nodded. That's your right. But before we call one, I think you should know what evidence we have. He opened a folder and slid several documents across the table. Photographs, bank statements, email printouts, text messages. Allison glanced at them. Her face didn't change. We found the tickets to the Bahamas, Bradley said. You and Preston Walsh, departing tomorrow morning. First class, one way. Allison said nothing. We found $18,000 in cash in your suitcase, Bradley continued. Hidden under a sweater, small bills. That's the second half of the payment to the fixer in Cambodia, isn't it? Still nothing. Bradley leaned forward. We also found your laptop, open, logged in. Emails to fixer, pp@proton.me. Text messages with Preston Walsh. All of it. Allison's jaw tightened. Just slightly, but I saw it. Bradley sat back. Mrs. Harrington, we have everything. The emails, the bank transfers, the flight reservations, the voice recordings. You're not getting out of this. So you can either sit here and say nothing while we build the case against you, or you can talk to me. Your choice. There was a long silence, and then Allison spoke. Her voice was flat, cold. Lucas is weak, she said. He gambled away everything we had. He buried us in debt. I needed a way out. Bradley didn't react. He just watched her. I met Preston 8 months ago, Allison continued. At a business conference in Boulder. He's successful, wealthy, CEO of a tech company, everything Lucas isn't. And you started an affair, Bradley said. Yes. Allison didn't look ashamed. She looked bored. Preston didn't know I was married. I told him I was separated, that I was in the process of getting a divorce. He believed me. Did he know about the plan? Bradley asked. Allison laughed. It was a short, sharp sound. Of course not. Preston's not a criminal. He's just useful. He has money. He has connections. And he was willing to take me away from all of this. Bradley tapped the folder. Tell me about George Harrington. Allison's expression didn't change. He's 63 years old. He's lived a full life. His wife is gone. He's alone. He has hundreds of thousands of dollars sitting in the bank doing nothing. It made sense. I felt like I'd been slapped. It made sense to have him taken away, Bradley said. Allison shrugged. Lucas owed $425,000. The life insurance policy was worth $350,000. Add in George's savings and the house, and we'd have more than enough to pay off the debt and start over. Bradley's voice was hard. And Lucas, your husband, what about him? Allison smiled. It was a cold, cruel smile. Lucas is easy to manipulate. He's terrified of the loan sharks. He's desperate. All I had to do was convince him there was no other way. And after? Bradley asked. After the plan was carried out, what were you going to do with Lucas? Allison leaned back in her chair as much as the cuffs would allow. Leave him, obviously. I'd already booked the tickets. Preston and I were supposed to fly out tomorrow morning. By the time Lucas figured it out, I'd be gone. And Preston, Bradley said, he didn't know any of this. No, Allison said. Sir Preston thought I was leaving Lucas to be with him. He thought we were starting a new life together. He had no idea about the rest of it. Bradley closed the folder. Mrs. Harrington, you're being charged with conspiracy to commit serious harm, fraud, forgery, and wire transfer violations. You're looking at 15 to 20 years in prison. Allison's face finally flickered, just for a second. Fear, or maybe anger. I want my lawyer now, she said. Bradley stood up. We'll arrange that. He walked out of the room. Allison sat there alone, staring at the table. I turned away from the glass. I couldn't look at her anymore. At 7 o'clock that evening, Preston Walsh arrived at the police station. Detective Bradley had asked him to come in for questioning. Preston had agreed immediately. I watched through the glass as they brought him into another interrogation room. He looked confused, worried, but not guilty. Preston Walsh was 51 years old, tall, well-dressed with salt and pepper hair and an expensive watch. He looked exactly like what he was, a successful businessman who had no idea he'd been manipulated. "Mr. Walsh," Bradley said, sitting down across from him, "thank you for coming in. I need to ask you some questions about Allison Harrington." Preston's face went pale. "Is she okay? What's going on?" Bradley explained everything. The plan, the fixer in Cambodia, the life insurance fraud, the emails, the money transfers. Preston's face went from pale to white. He looked like he was going to be sick. "I didn't know," Preston said. His voice was shaking. "I swear to God, I didn't know any of this. She told me she was getting a divorce. She said her husband was abusive. She said she needed to get away from him. I believed her." Bradley nodded. "We know Mr. Walsh. We've checked your phone records, your emails, your bank accounts. There's no evidence you were involved in any of this. You were a victim too. She lied to you." Preston put his head in his hands. Oh God, oh God. After an hour of questioning, the police cleared Preston Walsh. He wasn't charged with anything. He left the station looking like a broken man. Later that night, Detective Bradley sat down with me in the waiting room. He looked tired. "Mr. Harrington," he said, "I wanted to give you an update. We've finished the initial interrogations. Your son and your daughter-in-law have both been charged. They'll be arraigned tomorrow morning." I nodded numbly. Bradley hesitated. "For what it's worth, they're very different. Your son is guilty, yes. But he was manipulated. He's weak and he made terrible choices, but there's remorse there. Your daughter-in-law, on the other hand," he shook his head. "She's cold, calculating. She has no remorse. She planned this from the beginning." I looked down at my hands. Two people, two different levels of guilt, but both of them had destroyed my world. That evening, April 15th, 2023, Frank drove me home. I sat in the passenger seat staring out the window, watching Denver blur past. I didn't say anything. There were no words left. When we pulled up in front of my house in Washington Park, Frank turned off the engine and looked at me. "Do you want me to come in?" he asked. I nodded. We walked up the steps together. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The house was cold, silent, empty. I walked into the living room. My eyes went to the mantel above the fireplace. Photographs, framed memories. Margaret and me on our wedding day in 1987. She was wearing a white dress with lace sleeves. I was wearing a suit that was too big. We were smiling like we had the whole world ahead of us. Lucas, at 8 years old, standing next to a blue bicycle. I'd spent all afternoon teaching him how to ride it. In the photo, he was grinning, one hand on the handlebars, the other giving a thumbs up. Lucas in a cap and gown at MIT in 2011. Finance degree. Margaret and I had driven to Boston for his graduation. I remembered how proud I'd felt. Lucas and his wife on their wedding day in 2018. Standing under an arch of white flowers. I'd given a speech that night. I'd welcomed her into our family. I stared at the photographs. They looked like lies now. Cruel, beautiful lies. Frank stood beside me. "George." "I can't stay here tonight," I said. "Then don't. Come to my place." I shook my head. "No. I need to be here." Frank nodded slowly. "Then I'm staying with you. I'm not leaving you alone tonight." I didn't argue. Frank made coffee. I sat on the couch in the dark. I couldn't turn on the lights. I just sat there staring at nothing. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Lucas's face. I heard his voice. "I'm sorry, Dad. Please forgive me." At 3 in the morning, I got up and pulled out the old family photo album. I sat at the kitchen table and turned the pages slowly. Lucas as a baby. First day of school. Little League baseball. High school graduation. I stopped on a photograph from 2005. Lucas was 16. We were standing in the driveway next to the old Honda Civic I'd bought him. My arm was around his shoulders. He was smiling up at me. I remembered that day. I'd spent weeks teaching him to drive. When he finally got his license, I'd told him, "I'm proud of you, son. Your mom and I are so proud." I turned the page. MIT graduation. Lucas between Margaret and me holding his diploma. I'd told him, "Your mother would be so proud of you." I turned the page again. His wedding, 2018. Lucas at the altar holding his wife's hands. I'd given a speech at the reception. "Welcome to the family. You're not just my son's wife. You're my daughter." I closed the album. I couldn't look anymore. I thought about the last 18 months. The months I'd spent alone after Margaret passed away. The grief, the loneliness, the nights I'd sat in this house wishing she were still here. I thought about the hospital bills, the treatments that hadn't worked, the $80,000 we'd spent trying to keep her alive. It had drained most of our savings. That's why I only had $100,000 left. And my son had known that. He'd known how much I'd struggled, and he'd still tried to have me taken away. The next morning, a lawyer called. Robert Smith, assigned by the district attorney's office. "Mr. Harrington," he said, "I know this is difficult, but we need your testimony. You're the victim. Your testimony is crucial." I sat at the kitchen table, phone pressed to my ear. Frank was nearby watching. "What do you need?" I asked. "You'll need to testify in court," Robert said. "Tell the jury what happened, what they planned, how it affected you. You'll be in the same room as them. You'll have to face them." I closed my eyes. "I understand." "There's something else," Robert said. "Your son's lawyer will argue he was manipulated, coerced by his wife. They'll try to get him a lighter sentence. They might try to argue you were distant, that you didn't help him." I felt anger surge. "That's not true." "I know. That's why we need you to testify, to tell the truth." I took a breath. "I'll do it. I'll testify. They need to face justice." Robert was quiet. "I'm sorry, Mr. Harrington. No father should have to do this." "No," I said. "They shouldn't." I hung up. Frank looked at me. "You okay?" I shook my head. "No, but I made my decision. I'm going to testify." Frank nodded. "That takes courage." I didn't feel courageous. I felt broken. But justice had to be served, even if it tore apart what was left of my heart. The hardest part was still ahead. 2 weeks later, late April 2023, Detective Bradley came to my house with an update. Frank was there with me. He'd been staying at my place on and off since that first night, making sure I wasn't alone. I was grateful for it. I didn't trust myself to be alone. Bradley sat down at my kitchen table and opened a thick folder. "Mr. Harrington," he said, "the investigation is complete. I wanted to update you on what we've found." I nodded, my hands wrapped around a cup of coffee I hadn't touched. "First," Bradley said, "we coordinated with Interpol. The person your daughter-in-law hired in Phnom Penh, the fixer, has been arrested by Cambodian authorities. He's confessed. He admitted to receiving $12,000 from an American woman. He was waiting at Central Market on the date your son and daughter-in-law had specified. If you'd gotten on that plane, Bradley paused. Well, you wouldn't have come home. I felt sick. Second, Bradley continued, we've gone through all the phone records. Between your son and daughter-in-law, we found 47 phone calls and text messages specifically discussing the plan. They used coded language in some of them, but the context is clear. They were coordinating every detail. He slid a printout across the table. I looked at it. Dates, times, call durations. We also found search history on your daughter-in-law's laptop, Bradley said. She was researching non-extradition countries, how to disappear without a trace, how to set up offshore bank accounts. She was planning to take the money and vanish. I closed my eyes. The district attorney's office has reviewed all the evidence, Bradley said. They're confident we have an extremely strong case. Your daughter-in-law is being charged with conspiracy to commit serious harm, wire fraud, forgery, and several other counts. Your son is being charged with conspiracy and complicity. What does that mean? I asked. In terms of how long they'll be in prison. Bradley looked at me carefully. Based on the charges and the evidence, your daughter-in-law is looking at 15 to 20 years. Your son, because he's cooperating and showing remorse, is looking at 10 to 15 years. But nothing is guaranteed. It'll depend on the trial, on the jury, on a lot of factors. I nodded slowly. The trial is scheduled for July, Bradley said. 3 months from now, you'll be called to testify. So will your friend Frank. So will Raymond Foster, the man who warned you at the airport. The prosecution is going to build their case around your testimony. I'll be ready, I said. Bradley stood up. I know this is hard, Mr. Harrington, but you're doing the right thing. After he left, I sat at the table for a long time, staring at the folder he'd left behind. Frank sat down across from me. You okay? No, I said. But I will be, eventually. A few days later, I called Raymond Foster. We'd exchanged phone numbers at the police station, but I hadn't reached out to him since. I didn't know what to say. How do you thank someone for saving your life? But I needed to see him. I needed to understand. We met at a small coffee shop in downtown Denver. Raymond was already there when I arrived, sitting at a table by the window with a cup of black coffee. Mr. Harrington, he said, standing up to shake my hand. George, I said. Please, call me George. We sat down. For a moment, neither of us spoke. I wanted to thank you, I said finally, for what you did. If you hadn't stopped me, I wouldn't be here right now. Raymond nodded. I'm glad I was there. Why did you do it? I asked. You didn't know me. You had no reason to get involved. You could have just walked away. Raymond looked down at his coffee. I couldn't, he said quietly. I couldn't just walk away. Why not? Raymond was silent for a long moment. Then he spoke. I lost my son, he said. 10 years ago. 2013. He was 23 years old. Car accident. Drunk driver ran a red light and hit him head on. He was gone instantly. I felt my chest tighten. I was divorced by then, Raymond continued. My ex-wife and I, we didn't handle it well. The grief tore us apart. I haven't seen her in years. My son was the only family I had left. And when he was gone, he shook his head. I didn't know how to keep going. I'm so sorry, I said. Raymond looked up at me. When I heard your son on the phone that morning, when I realized what he was planning, I thought about my own son. I thought about what it would have been like if he'd been the one trying to have me taken away. And I thought about you, a father, alone, about to get on a plane, not knowing what was waiting for you. His voice cracked. I couldn't let it happen. I couldn't stand by and watch another father lose his life like that, not when I could do something to stop it. I didn't know what to say. I just sat there staring at this man who had saved my life because he understood loss in a way most people never would. Thank you, I said finally. Thank you, Raymond. He nodded. You're welcome. Over the next few weeks, Raymond and I met several more times. We'd get coffee or lunch or just walk through the park. We didn't always talk about what had happened. Sometimes we just sat in comfortable silence. He became a friend, a real friend, someone who understood pain and loss and grief in a way that most people didn't. Frank was there too, of course. Frank had been my rock through all of this. But Raymond was different. Raymond had saved my life. And in doing so, he'd given me a reason to keep going. For the first time since Margaret had passed away, I felt like the world still had good people in it. People like Raymond, people like Frank, people who showed up when it mattered. In early July, I received a letter from the court. The trial was scheduled to begin on July 10, 2023. I was listed as the primary witness for the prosecution. I would have to sit in that courtroom. I would have to look at Lucas. I would have to look at his wife. And I would have to tell the jury what they had done to me. Frank offered to come with me. Raymond offered too. I told them both yes. I needed them there. 3 months after that terrible day at the airport, the trial began. I would have to face my son in front of a judge and jury and tell the world what he had tried to do. The courtroom was packed. It was the first week of July 2023, and the Denver County Courthouse had drawn reporters from across Colorado and beyond. Camera flashes lit up the hallway outside courtroom 4A, every time someone pushed through the heavy wooden doors. Inside, the air was thick with tension. Rows of wooden benches were filled with spectators, journalists with notebooks, and sketch artists, because cameras were not allowed during proceedings. I sat in the front row of the witness gallery, my hands folded on my lap, trying to steady my breathing. Behind me, Raymond Foster and Frank Coleman sat shoulder to shoulder, their presence the only thread keeping me anchored. At the defense tables sat my son Lucas and his wife Allison, separated by 10 feet of polished oak and an ocean of betrayal. Lucas wore a gray suit that hung loose on his frame. His face was pale, his eyes red and hollow. He glanced at me once, then looked away as if the sight of me burned him. Allison, on the other hand, sat upright in a navy blazer, her expression cold and composed. She stared straight ahead, her lawyer, a sharp woman in her 40s, whispering instructions into her ear. Lucas's lawyer, a balding man with thick glasses, shuffled papers nervously. The prosecutor, Assistant District Attorney Maria Gonzalez, stood at the podium. She was in her mid-50s. Her dark hair pulled back into a tight bun, her voice steady and clear. She addressed the jury, 12 ordinary citizens from Denver and the surrounding suburbs, and said, "Ladies and gentlemen, this case is about greed, manipulation, and ultimate betrayal. It is about a son and a daughter-in-law who conspired to have an innocent man taken from this world so they could collect a life insurance payout worth $350,000. The first week of testimony was brutal. The prosecution presented forensic evidence, enlarged photographs of the life insurance policy application. The forged signature analyzed by a handwriting expert who pointed out the unnaturally even pressure and perfect loops that did not match samples of my authentic signature. Bank records were displayed on a screen showing the $12,000 wire transfer from my joint checking account to a phone number registered in Phnom Penh, Cambodia. An Interpol liaison officer testified via video link from Bangkok. He confirmed that Cambodian authorities had arrested a man known only as Mr. Sofiek, who admitted to receiving $12,000 as a down payment for what he described as an arrangement, targeting an elderly American tourist at the Central Market on the third day of his visit. In the second week, Raymond took the stand. He wore the same blue flannel shirt he had worn that morning at the airport, though it was freshly pressed. He recounted how he had been cleaning tables near gate A-17 when he overheard a man, Lucas, speaking urgently into his phone. He said, "He's about to board the plane. I don't know if I can do this." Raymond testified. Then a woman's voice on the other end said, "It's already done. We can't stop it now. Central Market, day 3. Make it look like a robbery." The courtroom was silent. Raymond's voice cracked as he explained why he had followed Lucas to gate B23 and stopped me from boarding. "I lost my son in a car accident 10 years ago," he said quietly. "I couldn't let another father lose his life if I had the power to stop it." Frank followed Raymond. He described the frantic phone call I had made to him from the airport, how he had driven to my house in Boulder, and what he had found: the life insurance documents, the bank statements, and Lucas's laptop left carelessly on the kitchen table. The laptop's search history was entered into evidence, screenshot after screenshot, showing phrases like life insurance claim processing time, accidental death Cambodia, and Central Market Phnom Penh crime statistics. A third witness that week was Stephen Parker, Lucas's friend. Stephen, 32 years old and visibly uncomfortable, testified that Lucas had arrived at his house on the morning of April 15th in a state of panic. "He was shaking," Stephen said. "He kept saying, 'I can't go through with it. I can't do this to him.' I didn't know what he meant until the police showed up." The third week brought the defendants themselves to the stand. Lucas went first. He broke down almost immediately. His lawyer had to ask the judge for a recess after Lucas sobbed so hard he could not speak. When he returned, his voice was hoarse. He admitted everything: the gambling debts, the loan sharks, the threats against Allison and their unborn child, a lie Allison had invented to manipulate him. He described how Allison had found the contact in Cambodia, how she had used his desperation and his shame to push him into the plan. "I never wanted this," he whispered, his eyes fixed on the floor. "I loved my father. I didn't know how to stop it once it started." Allison's testimony was colder. She did not cry. She admitted to finding the fixer online, to transferring the money, and to booking the tickets to the Bahamas with Preston Walsh. But she insisted Lucas was not innocent. "He knew what was happening," she said flatly. "He signed the insurance forms. He made the withdrawals. We were both in it." The fourth week was the hardest. I took the stand on a Tuesday afternoon. Maria Gonzalez asked me to recount the morning at the airport, the gifts, the hope I had felt when Lucas and Allison gave me the tickets, and the moment Raymond stopped me at the gate. Then she asked me to look at Lucas. I turned my head slowly. My son sat slumped in his chair, tears streaming down his face. "Mr. Harrington," she said gently, "if you had boarded that plane, do you believe you would be alive today?" I took a long breath. "No," I said. "I believe they planned to have me taken away on the third day in Phnom Penh at the Central Market, and to make it look like a robbery so they could collect the insurance money." The courtroom was silent. Closing arguments came on Friday. The jury retired to deliberate at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. They deliberated for 8 hours through dinner past midnight and into the early morning. At 10:30 on Saturday, they sent a note saying they had reached a verdict, but asked to present it on the following Tuesday to allow time for proper court scheduling. On Tuesday morning, the first week of August 2023, we returned to courtroom 4A. The clerk read the verdict aloud. The courtroom fell silent. Judge Harold Brennan, a stern man in his late 60s, adjusted his glasses and looked down at the papers before him. I sat in the front row, my hands gripping the wooden bench. Behind me, Raymond and Frank waited their presence, the only comfort I had left. Allison Marie Harrington, please rise. Allison stood, her navy blazer crisp, her face emotionless. Her lawyer stood beside her, but Allison showed no fear, no remorse, nothing. Mrs. Harrington, Judge Brennan said, "You have been found guilty of conspiracy to commit serious harm, wire fraud, forgery, and solicitation of criminal activity. For conspiracy, you are sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. For wire fraud, 3 additional years. These sentences will run concurrently. You will serve 15 years without parole." Allison did not flinch. She stared straight ahead as if the words meant nothing. "Lucas Michael Harrington, please rise." My son stood. He looked hollow, gray suit, hanging loose face, gaunt eyes, swollen. He trembled, gripping the table for support. "Mr. Harrington," the judge continued, his tone slightly softer, "you have been found guilty of conspiracy and wire fraud. The court acknowledges your cooperation and remorse, but your actions remain inexcusable. For conspiracy, you are sentenced to 10 years. For fraud, 2 additional years, running concurrently. Total 12 years. You may be eligible for parole after 8 years with good behavior." Lucas's knees buckled. His lawyer caught him, but his sobs echoed through the room. He turned toward me, tears streaming. "Dad," he whispered, "I know you can't forgive me, but I need you to know I'm truly sorry for what I did." I could not respond. My throat was tight, my chest aching. I stood slowly and walked out without looking back. Raymond and Frank followed. 6 months later, February 2024, I made the decision to visit Lucas one last time. I had not spoken to him since the sentencing. He had written 3 letters. I read them once, then locked them away. The Colorado Territorial Correctional Facility sat on the Eastern Plains, an hour from Denver. Gray concrete buildings, razor wire, flat winter sky. I showed my ID, passed through security, and was escorted to a small visiting room with a bolted table and 2 plastic chairs. Lucas was brought in minutes later. I barely recognized him. He had lost 20 pounds, his face hollow, cheekbones sharp. His hair, once dark and thick, was now streaked with gray, though he was only 34. He wore an orange jumpsuit with a number across the chest. His hands trembled as the officer removed his cuffs. We sat in silence. "I didn't think you'd come," he said finally, voice hoarse. "I almost didn't," I replied. "I'm glad you did." He swallowed. "I know there's nothing I can say to make this right. I broke my promise to Mom. I broke everything." His voice cracked. "I betrayed you. I betrayed her memory." "Yes," I said quietly. "You did." He nodded, tears falling. "I think about her every day. What she would say if she knew. I can't live with it, Dad." I looked at him and saw not the man who had conspired against me, but the boy I had taught to ride a bike, the teenager I had driven to MIT, the son I had loved. Yet that boy was gone. The man before me was a stranger. "I can't come back here, Lucas," I said steadily. "This is goodbye." His face crumpled. He nodded slowly. "I know. I hope you find peace, Dad. I hope you can be happy again." I stood. The officer stepped forward. I turned toward the door. "Dad." I paused but did not turn around. "Thank you," he said, voice breaking. "Thank you for giving me life. I'm so sorry I tried to take yours." I closed my eyes briefly, then walked forward. The door buzzed open, locked behind me with a heavy clang. I walked out of that prison and never returned. That was the last time I saw my son. August 2024, 1 year after the trial. I made the decision to sell the house in Washington Park. There were too many memories trapped in those walls. Margaret's roses in the garden, Lucas's childhood bedroom, the kitchen table where we had shared thousands of meals as a family. Every corner held a ghost. The house sold quickly for $680,000. I kept only a few things: Margaret's reading glasses, a photo album, and her favorite cardigan. I moved to Missoula, Montana to be closer to Frank Coleman. He had been my anchor through the darkest months, and I wanted to live near someone who understood. I bought a small log cabin on 3 acres at the base of the Bitterroot Mountains. It was quiet there. The only sounds were the wind in the pines, the occasional call of a hawk, and the creek that ran behind the property. For the first time in years, I could breathe. But the silence also brought the weight of everything I had lost. Some nights I woke up gasping, haunted by dreams of Lucas's face in the courtroom, or Margaret's voice asking me why I had not protected our son. I knew I needed help. I began seeing a therapist, Dr. Ellen Morris, a kind woman in her early 50s who specialized in trauma and family betrayal. Her office was small and warm with soft lighting and a shelf full of books. In our first session, I told her I did not know how to move forward. She listened carefully, then said, "George, your son's betrayal does not define who you are. You are a survivor, and survivors have the right to heal." Her words stayed with me. Dr. Morris recommended I join a support group for people who had been betrayed by family members. I was reluctant at first, but I went. The group met every Thursday evening in the basement of a community center in Missoula. There were 8 of us, men and women of different ages, all carrying similar wounds. Listening to their stories, I realized I was not alone. There was a woman whose daughter had stolen her life savings, a man whose brother had framed him for a crime he did not commit. Their pain mirrored mine, and in that shared space I found a small measure of peace. Raymond Foster flew out to visit me twice a year. He would stay for a week each time, and we would spend our days hiking the trails around Missoula, fishing in the Clark Fork River, and talking late into the night. Raymond became more than the man who had saved my life. He became one of my closest friends. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sun set over the mountains, I said, "You saved my life, Raymond." He smiled and shook his head. "I just listened to my gut, George. I'm glad I did." I began to live for the present. I volunteered at the Missoula Public Library 3 mornings a week, helping children with math and reading. Watching their faces light up when they solved a problem reminded me why I had become a teacher in the first place. I also started traveling again, something I had been afraid to do after what happened. I flew to New Zealand and hiked the Milford Track. I traveled to Iceland and stood beneath the northern lights, the sky swirling green and violet above me. These were places Margaret had always wanted to visit. I carried her memory with me, and in a strange way, it felt like we were seeing them together. Slowly, I learned how to smile again. I learned how to wake up in the morning without feeling crushed by grief. I learned that healing is not forgetting, it is choosing to keep living despite the scars. It's April 2025 now. I'm 65 years old, 2 years after that morning at the airport, and I'm finally healing. April 2025. I am 65 years old, sitting on the porch of my cabin in Montana. The mountains are still capped with snow, and the morning air is cool and clean. I hold a mug of coffee and watch the sunlight spread across the valley. This is peace, real peace. People often ask if I have forgiven Lucas. The truth is, I do not know. I still love him. He is still my son. But I cannot forget standing at that airport gate holding a boarding pass, moments away from boarding a plane that would have carried me to my death. Some wounds do not heal completely. They scar over and you learn to live with them. I have learned a painful truth. The people who can hurt you the most are the people you love the most. They know your vulnerabilities, your trust. When they exploit that trust, the betrayal cuts deeper than anything a stranger could inflict. Lucas knew I would do anything for him. He used that knowledge to try to have me taken from this world. But life has also shown me beauty. Raymond Foster, a complete stranger, risked his own safety to warn me. He saw something wrong and acted. That simple act of courage restored my faith in humanity. For every person driven by greed, there is another driven by compassion. Raymond saved my life not because he expected anything in return, but because it was the right thing to do. The greatest lesson I learned is about intuition. That morning at the airport, I felt something was wrong. Lucas's hands trembled on the steering wheel. He avoided my eyes. His wife stood cold and distant. Every instinct told me something was not right. But I ignored it. I told myself I was imagining things, that Lucas was just nervous. I dismissed my gut feeling because I trusted him. That trust nearly cost me my life. Your intuition exists for a reason. It is a survival mechanism designed to protect you. When something feels off, when a voice whispers that you should be careful, listen to it. Do not ignore the warning signs even when they come from people you love. Those are the hardest warnings to accept and the most dangerous to ignore. If you ever feel something is wrong, if someone's behavior does not match their words, if a situation feels unsafe, trust that feeling. Ask questions. Seek help. Step back. It could save your life. And if you see someone else in danger, speak up. Be like Raymond. Do not assume someone else will intervene. A single act of courage can change everything. I think about Margaret every day. I know she would be heartbroken by what Lucas did, grieving for the son who promised her on her deathbed that he would take care of me. But I also know she would be proud that I survived, that I chose to keep living, that I found a way to heal. Margaret taught me that love is not always soft. Sometimes love is fierce. Sometimes it is standing your ground and refusing to let betrayal destroy you. Sometimes it is choosing to testify because justice matters more than comfort. I testified not out of hatred, but out of commitment to the truth. If this story has touched you, share it. Someone might need to hear these words. Someone might be ignoring their instincts right now, dismissing warning signs, trusting when they should be cautious. If my pain can prevent even one person from suffering the same fate, then it was not in vain. Life is fragile, trust is precious, and intuition is a gift. I finish my coffee and set the mug down. The sun has climbed higher, warming the air. A hawk cries in the distance. I close my eyes and breathe deeply, feeling the weight of the past 2 years, not crushing me, but reminding me I am still here, still alive, still capable of hope. Trust your instincts. They might just save your life. Looking back now, I understand how easily love can blind us. This family story taught me that trust, when given without question, can sometimes become our greatest vulnerability. I believed my family would always protect me, yet I ignored the quiet warning signs right in front of me. What happened to me might sound like one of those dramatic grandpa stories people tell online, but for me it was painfully real, a moment where loyalty and betrayal collided in the most unexpected way. If I could give one piece of advice from this family story, it would be this: never ignore your instincts. When something feels wrong, there is usually a reason. I saw the tension in Lucas's hands, the way he avoided my eyes, and the cold calculation behind Allison's smiles. Yet I chose hope over caution. In many grandpa stories, the older man is portrayed as naive or powerless, but survival sometimes means learning to question even the people you love. This experience also revealed a harsh truth about human nature. Desperation and greed can change people in ways we never imagined. In my family story, a life insurance policy worth $350,000 nearly became the price of my life. Some may label what followed as revenge, but the truth is simpler than that. It was accountability. Protecting yourself legally, emotionally, and spiritually is not cruelty. It is wisdom. I also believe that faith plays a quiet role in the paths we survive. When I think back to that morning at the airport, I cannot ignore the timing. A stranger named Raymond stepped into my life at the exact moment I needed help. Perhaps that is why so many grandpa stories speak about unexpected guardians appearing when everything seems lost. Sometimes the right person arrives at the exact second you need them most. From this family story, I learned that survival is not just about escaping danger. It is about rebuilding afterward. It is about choosing healing instead of bitterness. I may never fully understand my son's choices, and forgiveness may always be complicated. But I refuse to let anger define the rest of my life. Thank you for walking this journey with me all the way to the end. If this family story moved you, I would love to hear your thoughts. What would you do if you were in George's place, caught between a father's love and a son's betrayal? Share your perspective in the comments, because every voice adds meaning to these conversations. And one final note: while this narrative reflects themes often seen in grandpa stories, some elements have been dramatized to make the message clearer and more powerful. If this type of story is not for you, that's perfectly okay. There are many other stories waiting for you to explore.